But we begin tonight with the firestorm ignited by news first reported by the New York Times, then the Washington Post, which a U.S. official later confirmed to NBC News. And it's the following, that some members of special counsel Robert Mueller's team believe the Attorney General Bill Barr downplayed the evidence against the president on obstruction. This is how the evidence against Mr. Trump was characterized in all of these reports, which, by the way, are all based on anonymous sources. To the Times, it was, quote, more damaging for the president than Mr. Barr explained. To the Post, it was alarming and significant. And to us here at NBC News, it was compelling. But, folks, we preached caution when Barr told us what Mueller's evidence really meant. So we're going to preach caution in this case as well, and for the same reason. We still have not seen a single complete sentence from this report. We're putting exclamation point, but also period. In many ways, this is the consequence of Barr's decision to clear the president. It's also a consequence of Barr's decision to sit on summaries that apparently Mueller's team reportedly prepared for this very issue for a public release. The House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler is now calling on the Attorney General to release those summaries. And as we wait for something, we're left with a vacuum and an arms race to fill it. President Trump fills it with claims that he's been totally exonerated because Bill Barr did exonerate him on obstruction. Now we've got the purported view from some of Mueller's team anonymously pushing back. And we're all debating the fallout from a report we have not seen a single complete sentence from. Joining me now is Rosalind Helderman. She is one of the reporters who broke this story for the Washington Post. Ken Delaney is a national security intelligence reporter here at NBC News. He was part of our team on this story. And Greg Brower is here, who knows firsthand about both the DOJ and Congress. He's a former U.S. attorney and a former FBI liaison to Congress. Rosalind, I'm going to start with you and Ken, but I'll start with you, which is, how nervous are you that we're basing all of this on anonymous or people that don't want to go on the record? You know who they are. But we're in this situation in the same way that Barr put us in there in the first place, where we're all flying a little blind here.
Yeah, I think I think the way that you put that in your introduction about the vacuum that's now being filled with a lot of people who have not read the report is a really good way to put it. I feel confident that we're accurately describing the attitudes of some members of the Mueller team. But I don't have a lot of confidence about exactly what's in that report and how damning or not damning it is, because we haven't seen it, and that's just a weird place to be.
Well, I was just going to say, the words you guys used were alarming. Yeah. Can you give us more? What does that mean? What is alarm? How did this source define alarming?
Yeah, I wish I could. I wish I could give you more. What we know is that there is this frustration among some members of the team about what's been happening in this time period, about the sort of hardening of public opinion around what's in a report that they spent a long time on. They spent 2 years on this report, blood, sweat, and tears. And now people have already decided what they think of it, even though they haven't actually seen it yet.
Ken Delaney, why won't anybody go on the record?
Because
I know you're trying too. Yeah.
And it's even more dramatic than just they won't go on the record. We're getting this secondhand. We're not getting this directly from people who work for Robert Mueller. We're getting this from people who spoke to those people. But the reason they won't go on the record, Chuck, is because they work for the Justice Department. They're not allowed to talk to us. It's a really sensitive matter. They were stony silence for 2 years in this investigation. It's amazing that we're even getting this much out of them, and it's important, and they're frustrated. But you're absolutely right. We don't know how far this frustration goes within the Mueller team. We don't know what Robert Mueller's views on this are. But I just want to point out that NBC News has a little more of a beat further than what the Post and the Times said, which is that we're hearing frustration over the fact that the Attorney General stepped in and cleared the president on obstruction. We're hearing some sentiment that there may have been an intention to leave that open for Congress or for the public. Because remember, the Attorney General said the Mueller report does not make a call on whether there's a prosecutable case for obstruction. They lay out the evidence, and some people on the team felt like that's where it should stand. They didn't anticipate Barr stepping in and saying no case.
Greg, I swear to God, you and I had this very conversation that we said it is probably Mueller's intent never to have made the decision, knowing this was a decision that Congress would have to make, not anybody at the Justice Department. I think you and I had that very conversation that would be the most obvious assumption.
Yeah, we did. And I would use your word, Chuck, caution. We need to be very cautious because, of course, we haven't seen the report. And as you mentioned, the sourcing is a matter of debate here. But assuming what the Times and others are reporting is true, it puts the department in a very bad spot. It creates daylight between the AG and the special counsel, which I'm sure neither one of them ever wanted to see in this matter. This is a report that's as high profile and as important as it gets. And so at the end of the day, what we really would all hope to have is there to be no daylight between the AG and the special counsel.
You know, Rosalind, I think one of the frustrations all of us have as reporters is when the special counsel's office broke tradition and pushed back on the BuzzFeed story that was wrong about the criminality issue regarding the president ordering Michael Cohen to lie to Congress. It made us all think, oh, does that mean all of the other stories are now true? If Mueller doesn't speak, you know, it created that. And I have to admit, I'm sitting here going, okay, if Mueller's team didn't like what was happening, why wait till now?
Well, right. And I think that that dynamic you're describing is exactly the reason why they were so quiet for so long, and exactly why the fact that they spoke out about that BuzzFeed story was so significant, because I think they understood, too, that they might be setting a new precedent. I mean, it's interesting to note there has been a statement today on the record from the spokeswoman for the Attorney General not disputing the reporting so much, but disputing the notion that the Attorney General mischaracterized, is moving too slowly, failed to release something that could be easily released. There has been no statement today from the special counsel's office. If they wished to either confirm or alternatively say that this reporting is wrong, they have a very easy way to do that, and they have not chosen to do so.
Rosalind, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I found the decision by Justice to put out a statement is the most significant development of the day, because it allowed all three news organizations to feel better about the reporting. Right. They could have not said anything, but they did. And I want to read from it, Ken, because I think it gives away something here. Here's the statement from Kerry Kupek. Given the extraordinary public interest in this matter, the Attorney General decided to release the report's bottom line findings and his conclusions immediately, his referring to Barr, without attempting to summarize the report, with the understanding that the report itself would be released after the redaction process. What I thought was interesting here, Ken, is admitting in a clearer form here than they did in the memo that he's not summarizing the report. And I'm sorry, and admitting that this is his conclusion.
And this is the second time that he's alluded to that, right? There was also a letter that he put out saying essentially that.
But he worded the letter a lot differently.
True. This is
at least a little
more clear. And the reason these guys are expressing this frustration and it's finding its way to us is because Barr substituted his judgment for the people that spent 2 years investigating obstruction. That's what's frustrating them. They're not talking about collusion. And by the way, there's a lot more in the report about collusion than simply there was no conspiracy.
Remember,
case.
Russian government.
Exactly.
We don't know that there wasn't conspiracy with Russians who just didn't happen to conspire with employees of the Trump campaign versus the government. There's always a lot of wiggle room.
We're reporting that the report is going to lay some of that out. But that's not frustrating the Mueller team, because they agree with the conclusion that Barr expressed that there is no conspiracy. They're frustrated on this obstruction issue. And I think it's still a big mystery why Mueller didn't make a call.
Greg, and this is Barr, they're portraying as if Barr merely released the report's bottom line findings. No. He made the call on obstruction.
Right. And that is confusing to all of us. And that was, at worst, it was that second letter, that March 24th letter, created confusion.
Right.
At best, it can create confusion. At worst, it's creating what we're seeing now with a pushback from the Mueller team. But I still haven't thought about this for a week plus now. I still can't figure out why Bob Mueller, of all people, would essentially abdicate. Apparently, we don't know. We're going to have to hear from him.
Do you really think he thought he was intending for Barr to make this call?
I can't imagine why. As we've discussed before, for the special counsel, whose sole mission is to take all of these tough investigative and prosecutive decisions away from the political appointees of justice, to say on the biggest decision, I'm going to punt to not only the politically appointed, Trump-appointed AG, but the guy, by the way, who wrote the memo a year ago that caused him to catch so much flack from at least Democrats in Congress. That doesn't make sense.
Rosalind, do you take anything? Were you surprised to find out that the FBI director hadn't read the Mueller report? I would thought due to the counterintelligence investigation that essentially Mueller took over that began inside the FBI, that he would have seen it?
I don't know. I mean, I do think that every indication has been that the circle is extraordinarily small, that very few people have actually read this thing. Barr's one letter did indicate that the report comes in two pieces, one piece having to do with Russian interference and the other piece having to do with obstruction of justice. He did not indicate that there's a counterintelligence section of the report. It may be that piece of it is not addressed in this report. I don't know.
I've heard that theory that it's actually, it could actually still be ongoing. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah.
Counter-intel?
I think the counter-intel part, if I might check.
Sorry, Rosalind.
Sorry.
We got an expert here, right?
Well, I've thought, as I've listened to people try to make sense of the Mueller report, what might be in it, that the counter-intel part of it, or the idea that there could be a counter-intel part, is overblown. I think we need to remember that the FBI has continued, and will continue to do counterintelligence investigations, perhaps in part based upon leads that the Mueller investigative work may have generated. But the Mueller report, the Mueller task, was not a counterintelligence investigation. It was a criminal investigation.
An important distinction there. Thank you, Greg Brower. Ken Delanian.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you, Rosalind Helderman. And thank you. Nothing like the abyss of these vacuums that Mr. Barr and Mr. Mueller have created for all of us. So thank you, guys. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel. So thank you. Now do me a favor. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.